Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, can you?
Yeah, this is really cool.
Perfect. We're both huge Nicolas Cage fans, right? Like, we love the guy for good reasons, for bad reasons, for cringy reasons.
Welcome to the Uncaging, Episode 1, The Best of Times.
Remember, these are the best of times.
So this is the first episode of
The Uncaging, yes.
The Uncaging,
Yep.
where we will be reviewing all things Nicolas Cage,
Absolutely.
starting from The Best of Times, which is today's episode. I'm David.
And I'm Satyam.
We went to college together, freshman roommates, and then, yeah. So this is something that he did in 1981, and he was 17 years old.
Okay. Yeah.
Super, super young.
Yep.
And it was going to be an ABC show. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depends how you look at it, it was never picked up by the network. What did you think of Nick Cage's very first appearance when he's doing those push-ups on the beach?
Oh, it was amazing. So we were talking about this a little bit before as well, but the main thing that struck me was, I mean, of course, so I'm going to go a little bit back further to how we came up with this idea in the first place.
Yeah.
So, of course, we're both huge Nicolas Cage fans, right? Like, we love the guy for good reasons, for bad reasons, for cringy reasons, everything. This guy has a magnetic charisma that, like,
he really does,
draws people into him, right? And, like, and we were, of course, drawn by it too. Among the various interests we share, this is one of the biggest ones, right? And
totally.
So back in college, when we were, just talking about stuff, watching movies, like what have you, playing games, whatever, we knew how much we loved this guy. So we even sat down to watch Snake Eyes, and that was the very first time. But unfortunately, we didn't have much time, and then our friends weren't as interested as we were, so we had to abandon it. Yeah. So for us, every second was gold, but for them, it was like, why are we even watching? So this is when we had this implanted in our minds, right? So over years, it's been slowly, like getting more and more. At least for me, it's been blossoming in my heart. And then every time I watch Nick Cage, I'm like, oh man, I wish we could just sit down and like talk about him, So then recently we've been like back and forth about it, and this is where the whole podcast comes in. So going back to my previous point, like over the years we've seen him in more recent stuff, right? Like stuff that like he's known for, like, National Treasure or Ghost Rider or Face Off or, all of these movies that he's like really famous for. And of course the memes, right? So many memes.
Definitely the memes.
So the first thing that struck me was, one, how young he was, because and it makes sense. It's 1981, Secondly, how much hair he had, and like blonde hair. It's crazy. He had like a head full of hair.
How ripped.
And absolute. That's the third thing. So the movie, the TV movie, it casts him as this hunk, like, compared to the other protagonists that are like more nerdy, like shorter, they cast him as this hunk of a guy who's like a ladies' man, who's charming, who's like, so yeah, right off the bat, I was like, this is a side of Nicolas Cage I have never seen. And I was so excited. I was like so pumped. I'm like, wow, this is amazing, And yeah, that was my first impressions, honestly, and I was so excited to keep going on with the movie, So
the energy too is like, I know it, like we've seen National Treasure and we've seen, some of his classic ones, but I feel like seeing him so young, and so it's kind of like, oh my god, like he was young too,
Yeah.
It was
I know,
really
exactly.
really interesting.
Nicolas Cage was young, like
Right. He's always looked old for my life.
I know, yeah. So yeah, it was amazing. Fun. So what did you think of the movie overall, and then we can get into what we feel about him, like him as a character.
So it was interesting. It was very 80s. It felt like, the stereotypical show American show from the 80s,
right.
where it was also interestingly structured because each kid kind of has his own kind of mini episodes or mini sketches,
Right.
and then they come together in these song and dances.
Right.
So I thought that was really interesting. Something that I felt was kind of weird was there were so many characters that, and potentially it could have been explored if the show kept going. But how like you're going to connect all of these characters, because it, from a writing perspective, I guess it could be, like if you look at Friends, 6 people,
right,
and then you start analyzing, this person is never really talking to this one,
right.
So I wonder how they would have done that
Right.
in like an episode with 7 or 8 of these characters.
Right, yeah.
And also one thing that I liked is how Crispin, the main guy, is always talking to the camera.
Yeah, like, they break the fourth wall with this character. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and the breaks for the commercials. He's like, and we'll be right back right after these messages.
Right,
so it feels like they're sitting in the living room with you, which is it's like you don't see that nowadays in shows.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for me it was like, like you said, I felt like it was definitely a pitch for a bigger show, right? Like they wanted this pitch to go through, be a big success, like, and turn it into something like huge, like Cheers. Cheers was such a big thing back then. Seinfeld, I don't know exactly how Seinfeld lines up with the timing, but Friends of course comes later, which is like this is something that like a decade ago Friends could have been, and like or alternatively this could have become the Friends before Friends, right? So it was really interesting to see. I also thought it was cool that they picked teenagers instead of young adults, like in their 20s, right? So that also makes me feel that they were going for like a balance between catering to more older audience, but also catering to younger audience. Because how kids and like young teenagers look up to teenagers, like older teenagers, right? So I feel like this was trying to tie together all of these different demographics. So that's why we see some interesting topics come up. I definitely noticed some like women empowerment topics, of course, like dating and like all of that, like trying to get someone to go to prom with you, right? And also the girl that wanted to be the guitarist or wanted to join the band. It's like trying to break the stereotype of like, okay, girls should be this, guys should be this, so I really thought it was interesting. The singing and dancing was kind of jarring, but that's probably
I think it's just so far away from anything that we have ever seen in that sense.
How I felt.
That it feels.
Why are they randomly singing and dancing?
Exactly.
For me, it makes a little bit like I've seen this kind of stuff before because I grew up watching a lot of Bollywood as well, Hindi movies. So in Hindi movies, the actors and actresses just randomly break out into this elaborate dances like throughout the movies. I was getting those vibes, like I'm like, why are they just dancing randomly out of nowhere? But it makes sense. Like they're going for this cheery, like happy. I mean, the show is or the TV movie is called The Best of Times, right? So they're trying to channel this happy, positive vibe and like to capture this kind of a feeling, And I really like the fact that was it Crispin Glover? His character, the message at the end. I liked how he was saying like, just because we're teenagers, don't just disregard us because we have thoughts and feelings and all of these things. I really like that message too because it's like it's trying to portray them as people as well, which they are, right? So
and I feel like it hasn't changed that much. Like if you remember to when we were teenagers, we wanted to be the center of the world. We needed everyone's attention.
Yeah.
I feel like every generation's teenagers needs some kind of thing like that.
And
so
similarly, every adult is usually just like disregarding what a teenager thinks, right? So So.
It's like a PSA to. I mean, I don't know what time slot the show would have occupied in like prime time, but imagine if they were playing it at like 8 or 9 p.m.
Yeah.
It's when the whole family is watching it, so it's like telling the parents too, like
exactly, the
teenagers that you have in the room watching with you are like people too, and like when we grow up, and we see teenagers like, you know, TikTok and stuff like that, we're like, oh, come on, like they, you know, but we, like he says, we used to be one of them.
Yeah.
Like adults used to be teenagers. So it was, I don't want to say like, obviously not a blast from the past because we weren't born in the 80s, but it felt, even if it's from 1981, it kind of felt like voicing some of the opinions that I would have towards adults when I was a teenager. And having passed since 1981 so many years, it's like, oh my God, I mean, this message could have been recorded like last year or something. It felt timely in a way.
And one thing interesting in the same topic that I noticed was the only adult we ever encounter is the person from this convenience store, right? Like,
I had not noticed that.
Crispin's mom, we just hear her through the door, like on the other side of the door, and it's literally this convenience store guy that is the wisecrack. He's the adult. He caters to their needs, you know, and then he even gets the gig at the end of getting snacks up for the dance at the end, and he's like, it's so funny. His character I really enjoyed, but it's I like the message there because first of all, we're seeing this world literally just through the lens of the teenagers. Like the only adult we see is this convenience store guy, right? And second of all, I think it's showing how much time kids of that era used to spend in convenience stores. Like, I feel like that was the mall before the mall, or like right now we just shop online, or, you know, especially with COVID and everything. But I feel like for that age demographic and for that time, the convenience store was like the cool hangout spot. That and like the park and like school, of course.
Well, the first song is in the convenience store when and that was something really, really interesting to me, how they want to exchange the glass bottles with the 7-Eleven guy for like a quarter, so that they can, you know, all that thing, which I've never done, but then that's one of the points where they blast into song. And I totally agree. It's like they used to hang out there. One of them, I think, has a job there. The guy that was another really, really funny scene when he says, hey, if you never go to college or whatever, you can come work as a stock boy. And then he says, oh, I'm actually going to college for like nuclear engineering or something brutal. Yeah. So it's the 7-Eleven guy is that's an interesting observation, that he's the only adult. I hadn't thought about that.
So I found that fascinating for sure. So shall we transition slowly into our boy Nick? Yeah.
So let's do it.
So the first thing that kind of got me sad, like I was saying, of course for us getting into this was to see more of him, right? Like to tabulate him. How was he? And like, we want to follow this through this podcast. We want to follow chronologically. So as soon as I started the movie, of course, I wanted to see him on the screen, front and center, 100% of the time. Give me Nick Cage dialogue. Give me Nick Cage like person, you know, just give me Nick Cage, right? And it irked me a little bit at the beginning that he was just a guy among these. And even then, he was just like this stereotypical hunk, you know, like he's there just to be this kind of awesome guy. Like, I love how he keeps showing off his biceps, like, you know? And when I first, like, maybe for the first 70% of the movie, I was a bit bummed out because, of course, knowing who he is now, I wanted to see more of his chops, you know, because he could have carried that harder than they gave him. And of course, it's an ensemble cast. They wanted to do more, so they're giving little teasers for everyone. So, but the final monologue that he had, oh my God,
the one on the beach, dude. That one was so, like, up to that point, I had watched it in one go. Up to that point, it felt cheery, it felt heartfelt at times. You know, it was super cheesy, but still, it felt nice to watch. And then up to that point, it was like someone dropped the piano, because there's no music. It's just him, and it's the waves in the background on the beach. and he's talking about getting drafted to Central America. And I don't know if it's because we've never had to deal with that, I guess, because in the 80s there was the stuff with Central America and the US, so they did have to draft kids.
Our boy Eduardo.
Right. Yeah. Oh yeah. Shout out to Eduardo. But yeah, it just felt maybe it was appropriate for the show back then, but watching it now, I'm like, oh my God. Like, and it felt so raw too, because he's looking into the camera and he's saying that he doesn't want to get drafted. And every time he brings it up, his dad never talks about combat. He talks about how fun it was with his friends and, you know, stuff like that. The kind of like, it's like when you watch the Vietnam movies.
For sure.
You know, combat is brutal, and veterans come back and don't want to talk about it. They talk about the buddies that they made and more less horrific things to do with the war. So it just, I don't know. I was like, I had to stand up and kind of like, whoa! It was so
that was
jarring.
The gravitas of the movie, and I loved how they handled it, because they could have chosen a jaded adult to deliver that, right? Like the message. But they chose a kid who, up to this point, we've seen as this very confident, very macho, like thinks of himself as the guy, can date any girl, right? And for teenagers, that's a huge aspect. And at this point, he is telling us his story. And I loved the bit where he said, his dad says to him, like, I forgot the exact line, so I'm going to paraphrase, but he says his dad tells him that one day he may become a man, like if he gets drafted, if he goes overseas, you know? And there's this sadness in the way he says it, and he like mock points to his biceps again, and he says, I thought I already was a man. And that was so incredibly done, because I think that's what really brings it to me thinking this is for a bunch of like demographics, because then it's the point of view of a teenager who's turning into an adult. And Crispin says it at the end too, that they're not kids, but they're not adults yet. So it's this teenager who has, now I'm thinking it's perceived confidence, because he's not sure, because he's still trying to please his dad, or like, you know, trying to show or prove that he's a man. And the way he says this is so sad and like so interesting, that for him, being an adult, he thought meant having this great body, have this great confidence, you know, like he thinks that's proof enough. But then we know as adults now, and like, of course, we've not gone through anything such as war or anything, but we know that war is so brutal that guys that usually go into war and come out are totally different people, right? And so I love how his dad glosses over the parts that are actually like being in the front lines, like exactly. And he says his dad just talks about, like, you know, hanging out with his military friends, like going to Japan or something, I think he mentions at one point. But then when he asks about
he says something about Tokyo, Tokyo or something too.
But when he actually asks about how combat was, that's when the dad glosses over and like changes the topic or something, right?
Is also, imagine from the dad's perspective, who we never meet, and you know, he doesn't want his kid to go to war, because he's been in it. I mean, I can't imagine. It's very hard. I think that's why it was kind of the most like shocking thing of the episode or movie. I can't relate, but it felt so sad. It felt so
so
raw.
I think the gravitas for me in that movie or short TV movie was that scene where, like, okay, it's our boy Nick, and it's been disappointing that we haven't seen much of him, but then he like clicks with the scene, and who knows, like a big part of his next opportunities must have stemmed because people saw the potential in this kid, you know. Of course, he had some family connections and whatnot, but he has to carry his own weight as well. And Yeah, that scene really got me. It felt fulfilling to see him, in that scene. So,
like in his very first thing, he actually, he delivers a very raw message. Yeah. One thing, like to take out of that scene, or to transition out of that scene, was when he says that he can use the excuse of going to war to pick up girls. And then fast forward to the end, to the dance, I think it was Kevin, who's calling nonstop throughout the episode, trying to ask anyone out. He's with a girl, and he tells her that he's being drafted, and it's the last day home, and she instantly feels sorry for him, which is what the dad had told him, jokingly, I assume, but it was a good transition, I guess.
Oh,
I mean, how else do you transition out of that? Out of that scene,
they told their message, but then they brought it back to more lighter side of things by putting in that reference and also showing us at the end that he actually did end up using it. So, it was really well done. It was really well handled.
Yeah. One of the things that I liked about the shopkeeper.
Oh, dude, absolutely.
I keep going back to the shopkeeper because he has some hilarious one-liners. When I can't remember I think it's Crispin, when he comes in because he wants the Talking Heads cassette. He says, "I've got wonderful news," and the guy says, "You quit?" And he says, "No, you're getting drafted. Better than that." And then he says, "Nothing could be better than you getting drafted."
Yeah.
Which I mean, I laughed out loud. It was really fun.
I think in the same scene, I remember one thing. He plays the music, but then at the end when it stops, the guy's like, "Oh, I love the sound of that." And then Crispin is like, "But I don't hear anything." And he's like, exactly. Yeah, so yes.
He likes the sound of silence.
The more adult I become, I can relate to that sentiment, where like sometimes quiet is very peaceful and like very serene, Shout out to Serenity.
Yeah.
Serenity.
To who? Oh yeah, Serenity. We might cover that in a future episode. Bonus episodes.
Oh god.
But yeah, I mean, overall, it's a short episode. His first real thing. I wonder if he did commercials or something, or maybe some other audition tapes before it. But his first one, like you said, I think he did, in that one line, I think he redeems himself and potentially catapults into, because I think he gets his next thing the following year in 1982.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. But like I had told you prior, I don't know if it was a good thing or a bad thing that they didn't continue the show. Because if they did continue the show, say the show lasted 2 years, he wouldn't have done the following 2 or 3 movies, which I mean, it could have changed his career.
He may have been
completely
typecasted into this kind of a role for his life. Like, think about the cast of Friends, right? Like, Joey, you don't see him as anything other than Joey because he was just typecasted. And after that, people expect him to do that in everything, right? Like David Schwimmer as well. Although David Schwimmer, I think he ended up doing more variable roles. So yeah,
Jennifer Aniston is the one that really was able to kind of break away. Yeah. Feels the same kind of way with the Harry Potter kids.
When you're in something that iconic, people expect you to see that. Elijah Wood too, right? Like Frodo. Like, we just think of Frodo when you see him. But yeah.
I wrote some notes about his life, which we could talk about. So obviously he's the nephew of Francis Ford Coppola, who directed The Godfathers. He directed Apocalypse Now and a bunch of other stuff. It was really interesting. He changed his last name to Cage with the inspiration of Luke Cage from Marvel. And he did that to potentially avoid any nepotism that could be related to Coppola.
I didn't even know until you told me.
Yeah.
That's how well he did the job, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's I wonder, because the credits at the very beginning show him as Nicolas Coppola. I wonder if he made the change right after this first one.
Yeah.
We'll have to see that. But yeah, and then actually, if you check his filmography, he works in two of Francis Ford Coppola's movies, which is cool because at that point, in order to be directed by Francis Ford Coppola at that point, a very, very famous director, he, like you said, he has to have proved his weight. You can be his, Francis Ford Coppola's son, and if you're not cut out for it, you're not going to get cast because he carries his own weight. Absolutely. He's like, I directed The Godfather, I directed Apocalypse Now. Sure. He needs to keep his name up. So it's telling that I know that it's his uncle, but that he was cast in movies of director of that caliber.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, it was super interesting to see this ensemble cast that I've seen, like Crispin Glover, I've seen in, like sporadically in things, other actors as well. So going forward, I'll remember these names. If they come up in some random movies that I happen to watch, then it'll be really interesting to see them. Yeah, that was very fun.
Definitely. Yeah, this was I think a great like dipping our feet into Nick Cage's vast ocean of entertainment.
And like I said, like it was so unbelievably different from anything I've seen from him in the past, or like in the future of this movie. Like that I'm fascinated to see how he evolves into the Nick Cage we know. Like.
Mm-hmm. Like I want to try to pinpoint that one movie where he becomes
like
Nick
when does
Cage.
he become like it's gonna be so fascinating to keep going down the list and see how he transitions and like where he becomes the Nicolas Cage. Yeah
Definitely. It's gonna be a fun adventure. We have many hours of TV.
Me neither.
And I cannot wait.
Excited. I'm so glad we're doing this. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
We should start rating maybe the movie by itself, and then what we thought of Nicolas Cage in the movie, because I think it'll be fascinating to follow over the whole filmography, like how we think he evolves, or like does he go up and down, or like so it'll be interesting. So what do you think? You can take a little bit of time, but what do you think? How do you rate these two?
I would give the best of times. I would give it. Do you think we should do it out of 5
out of 10,
or do it out of
better,
10?
because there's more variability, I think, to go. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And I'll write it down so we can reference in future stuff too. So I would give the actual episode. I think I would give it like a 6, because I did think that it has potential, but it's hard. It's like when you watch a pilot to any TV show now, you start seeing a little bit, but it's only the first TV show. You can't really. I mean, how much are you going to develop in 40 minutes? So for the potentiality, if that's even a word, of the show, I would give it a 6 out of 10. And then Nick Cage, I think I would give him a 7 out of 10. And if that one draft monologue wasn't there, he would get a lower grade. But I think that he did a good one.
Yeah, I totally agree with your point. So
you?
The movie in itself, it was refreshing because it was so different from what I'm used to watching. It was happy, it was jovial, it was a start of something that could have been bigger. So that makes me think that, with everything in life, any project you start, right, at the beginning, it's going to be super rough. But then you slowly polish it and develop it over time. This had the potential to become bigger and bigger slowly. So yeah, I would like to give it a 6 as well. I think that's a fair score for it. And Nicolas Cage, like the first 70% of the movie before the monologue, I was kind of disappointed because, and through no fault of his own, story went, that's how they decided to go, right? So, but because of that scene, it has really pulled me up to 7. I think 7 is very fair.
Okay. Awesome. And yeah, I just wanted to say again how I was slightly disappointed at the beginning because it felt like, he's just in it. and he's not really going to do anything. Like when he's playing pinball and he's saying Stanford or Harvard, and his friend tells him that there's no beach in Harvard, so he says, "Oh well, that settles that." I thought he was going to be in those little mini monologues. So yeah, like you said, I'm just really happy that he had that one monologue there.
Just like a last fun fact, I guess. So The Best of Times, there's another movie called The Best of Times, and that has like Robin Williams, Kurt Russell, and like all these big stars in it. You know, I don't know if you noticed that. I didn't.
What is it about?
I just saw it on IMDb, and like I was so surprised that I was like, wait, Nicolas Cage got his first movie with these amazing actors? Like, that's a great start. But then I started reading it and I'm like, wait, like I don't see him on the cast list, you know? So I went back and I checked again and it was the same name, but our movie was 5 years earlier. So yeah, but that was really interesting.
I had the same feeling as you. I kept typing The Best of Times, and there's a song by Styx that I had never heard, but it kept coming up. I had to like keep typing The Best of Times 1991 or The Best of Times Nick Cage. So yeah, I wonder how many people either remember having watched the pilot, if it even did pilot on TV, or you know, hearing of him, because I have never heard of him.
Yeah, and even the IMDb page for it is pretty barren. Like, you just have these list of stars that eventually became, you know, who they became. But yeah, the page doesn't have like a huge synopsis or anything either. So yeah, unfortunate, but yeah, maybe it's a good thing, you know. Yeah. We'll see how he does in the next few. Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, me too.
So this was the Uncaging, hosted by David Toro and Satyam Kanal. And it's been great to bring everyone our little thesis or explanation of the first Nick Cage movie, The Best of Times. And yeah, we'll see you next time for the second movie on the list.
See you next time.
These are the best of times.